Breaking news from the National Football League. In a stunning development, the Ravens have backed out of the trade for star pass rusher Maxx Crosby. The Raiders announced the news but did not offer any more details. Now, last week, the Ravens acquired the five-time Pro Bowler in a blockbuster for 2 first-round picks in a move that was supposed to improve their pass rush considerably, but now it's off. For more on the situation, I'm joined by CBS Sports lead NFL insider Jonathan Jones. JJ, simply, what happened here?
Madeline, this is something that you do not see at this level of a trade, okay? Sometimes it happens once every year, maybe once every other year, a player's going to back out of a deal, or a team says, we didn't like what we saw when our doctors got their hands on him, and so we're going to back out. It never involves a player who is a perennial all-pro that a team has dealt 2 first-round picks for. Does not happen. So what I can tell you is, according to sources, the trade fell through following a medical evaluation of Maxx Crosby. He posted on Instagram that he was in Baltimore. And so one can take from that and assume that the Baltimore doctors were able to check on him. Now, we know that he dealt with a meniscus injury last year. He was trying to play through it through the end of the year. We remember all the hubbub there in December where he wanted to keep playing. The Raiders were going to shut him down. Were they tanking? Were they doing what was best for Maxx? What I can tell you is that he was struggling during practices for a lot of last season. And the Raiders did feel, while they were hoping to get the #1 overall pick to situate them for Fernando Mendoza, they did believe they were doing the right thing for Maxx Crosby at the time. He gets the surgery by a very famous, well-known doctor, Dr. Neil Elatrash, and the thought is that he was going to be fully healthy and just fine for the 2026 season. But all trades are not official until Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern, first of all. And second of all, they are contingent upon the team that is trading for the player feeling good enough about the medical evaluation. Clearly, the Ravens do not feel good enough about the medical evaluation of Maxx Crosby. And look, if it were just a knee thing or just an ankle thing that, he's going to struggle a little bit, but it'll get right, you would think that the Ravens would continue to go through with this. They gave away the 14th overall pick. They gave away next year's first-round pick, something the Ravens have never done in their entire history. But instead, they pull out of the deal. They are going to get back their 14th overall pick. They're going to get back their 2027 first-round pick. Maxx Crosby goes back to the Raiders, and something in such a large deal, Madeline, we have never seen something like this before in the NFL.
Right, because you mentioned the magnitude. I mean, this is Maxx Crosby is no secret. I mean, the entire league knew that he was dealing with a meniscus injury. That shouldn't be a surprise to the Ravens. Whatever they discovered in the medical, was it that bad, or is this a negotiation tactic to say, hey, maybe we want to change the compensation going this way and that way for this deal, or is this deal just DOA?
It's DOA. It's done. That's it.
Yeah.
And what's important to note here is it's impossible to think that Maxx Crosby is going to be a Las Vegas Raider in 2026. We're going to get to potential destinations for him. This isn't the Ravens saying, you know what, we kind of don't really want to do the 2-1s. Let's do a 1 and something else. That's it. Okay. And look, what's also important, we all have been advised by medical professionals, and there are opinions. And so that is not to say that the Baltimore Ravens' medical opinion of Maxx Crosby is fact. That is not to say that 30 other teams would hold the same opinion as what the Baltimore Ravens very clearly believe. But it is within the Baltimore Ravens' right now, before Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern, to say, we don't like that, and we are going to pull out of that. We see it a little bit more in the NBA. I know that happened recently between the Lakers and the Hornets on a deal, and that was a big deal. This is so much larger than that. And I can't even begin to describe it. It is shocking to the NFL. I'm getting so many texts right now. I'm getting a text from an agent. How can an agent or a team trust the Ravens again? Is what I just got through right now, because this was a deal done days ago, Madeline. Everybody knew about the knee and had his injury history. And then they get him there, and clearly a medical issue that they say we can't go forward with the 2 first-round picks.
Well, and this also puts the Raiders in a kind of precarious position because, as you mentioned, this happened days ago. They have been proceeding as such, and with the cap space that they understood to be available with Maxx Crosby off the books and all of that to be said, you know, this puts them in a sense of urgency to say, okay, now where do we move Maxx Crosby to? As you mentioned, it's all likelihood that he will not be on the Las Vegas Raiders next season, but this has to really affect the field in terms of, okay, if another team does decide to trade for Maxx Crosby and does decide to use this as like, hey, listen, maybe we offer lower compensation because the Ravens saw something in that medical. Maybe we can get him for a little bit less than you were offloading him for. I mean, how does this affect the market for Maxx Crosby?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head because this really does hurt the Las Vegas Raiders in terms of, okay, he's not going to the Baltimore Ravens and you're not getting those 2 ones. Okay, well, we want to get 2 ones from somewhere. Where are they going to come from? Why would somebody else give the Raiders 2 ones right now? Why would they do that? And so this puts them, the Raiders, in a very, very difficult situation. Now, with the brevity of the statement from the Raiders, it is very clear that they disagree with the determination made by the Baltimore Ravens. One can extrapolate that the Raiders had been very clear as far as they could be with the medical situation of Maxx Crosby, right? One would assume that they did not hide anything, and if so, that Baltimore would have asked as many questions as possible to make sure they had sussed out everything that they needed to before their doctors literally got their hands on Maxx Crosby. So where does this leave the Raiders? Fortunately for them, they do have the cap space to bring Maxx Crosby back for a day or 2 or a week. They have that cap space. Imagine if they didn't. Imagine if they were a little closer to the cap and they were making these deals for Tyler Linderbaum and eating the money for Geno Smith and all these things, and then all of a sudden, oh, hey, you got to take Maxx Crosby back under your cap umbrella. That would be a disaster over the next 12, 18 or so hours. So the Raiders can take him back. But in terms of where he's going to go, yeah, the compensation certainly is going to be limited. Now, what I would say is the Dallas Cowboys were very much in the mix for Maxx Crosby. And they were not offering 2 ones, but they were offering a 1 and then a 2 and then maybe a veteran player. I've been reporting earlier today about Osa Odigizua. He was alleged, if you will, to be involved in the trade for Maxx Crosby that ultimately did not go through. The Cowboys still could move on from Osa Odigizua. So one has to assume that even though they went out and just changed some money for Kenny Clark and just went out and got Rashawn Gary, that if the Cowboys still want Maxx Crosby, maybe it's not the same deal as it was 5 days ago, but it still could happen. So the Raiders aren't entirely, in the parlance of our times, screwed. They can still send him somewhere so long as that team's doctors disagree with what the Baltimore Ravens team doctors clearly believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the brevity of the Raiders' statement. 2 sentences, one of which being, "We will have no further comment at this time," shows that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. But you know what? Remains to be seen how this all unfolds. And of course, the new league year doesn't start until Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, when all of these deals and negotiations that the Raiders have been agreeing to with free agents can become official. CBS Sports lead NFL insider Jonathan Jones, thanks so much for the insight. Maxx Crosby's had a pretty good career in the National Football League. Since 2019, he's 6th in the league in sacks, 1st in TFLs, 5th in quarterback hits, and 11th in defensive snaps, but leads all defensive linemen. Coming off a meniscus injury, we'll see how bad that knee injury really is, but the deal is off. Crosby no longer headed to Baltimore. Coming up, we continue to discuss the trade that is no more. News that shocked the NFL world day before the NFL new league year begins. Maxx Crosby no longer headed to Baltimore. We discuss next on CBS Sports HQ. Breaking news from the NFL in a stunning development. The Ravens have backed out of the trade for star pass rusher Maxx Crosby. The Raiders announced the news but did not offer any more details. Last week, the Ravens acquired the 5-time Pro Bowler in a blockbuster deal for 2 first-round picks in a move that was supposed to improve their pass rush considerably, but now the deal is off. For more on the trade, joined now by CBS Sports NFL analyst and two-time Super Bowl champion Bryant McFadden. B-Mac, this is shocking news to see a trade of this caliber fall apart at the last second like this. What was your immediate reaction?
I was surprised. To your point, Madeline, shocking. I mean, it's the 25th hour, basically, before the new calendar year kicks in. And all of these deals have been, quote unquote, verbally agreed upon, right? Of course, this trade with the Raiders sending Maxx Crosby to the Baltimore Ravens, one of the bigger news that happened this past Monday. And now the Ravens are basically saying, no deal, saying that he failed the physical. I'm astonished, I'm surprised, I'm shocked, I'm confused. There's a lot of mixed emotions going on with me, and I have no dog in the race. So just think about what the Ravens fan base, what they're feeling and how they're feeling. Think about the Raiders and what they're feeling as well. And the same can be said for the organization, because for the Raiders, they had a massive deal in place in terms of their haul they were getting in return for Maxx Crosby. So there's a lot to really digest, and we will digest this as days come and go. But right now, I'm super shocked, just like the rest of the NFL world.
Yeah, it is surprising. And when you look at the fact that the Ravens had their eye on a star elite pass rusher in Maxx Crosby, now they're pivoting, positing that Trey Hendrickson is the move for the Ravens. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no question. If you're the Ravens, you have to make a splash signing to improve the rushing element from your defense. Last year, that was an Achilles heel for them in terms of putting consistent, relentless pressure on opposing quarterbacks. So me personally, when I heard this news and I was just kind of dissecting everything, when it comes to the NFL, especially during this time of the year where you have guys, getting physicals done, organizations, Madeline, they can fail a guy at any given time, honestly, especially if there's a previous injury. Right? Because scar tissue, anything can always surface in some of these examinations. So I'm not surprised to hear a guy fail a physical. But also, too, in seeing how this happened and the timing of this deal, I don't want to open up this Pandora's box and start this conspiracy theory, but I wonder if the Ravens felt like, you know what, we kind of gave too much for Maxx Crosby. And we potentially could go get a guy like Trey Hendrickson and keep all of our first rounders and still be in a really, really nice spot in terms of improving our pass rushing element. Because if you look at 2 first rounders for Maxx Crosby, I heard Emery allude to it. The Dallas Cowboys had a deal in place, but it wasn't 2 first rounders. The Baltimore Ravens came out and did the unthinkable that led to them agreeing with the Raiders to be able to receive Maxx Crosby. So maybe the Ravens were having some type of buyer's remorse. Like, you know what? Let's keep our 2 first rounders and go get a guy like Trey Hendrickson, because in terms of the gap of separation between Trey Hendrickson and Maxx Crosby and rushing the passer, I mean, it's almost like they can be considered the same player, in my opinion.
But if it is that close, B-Mac, and if they are so comparable in that regard, why wait till now to pull out of the deal and pivot in that regard? Why wasn't Trey Hendrickson in free agency a top priority for the Ravens then?
Because Trey Hendrickson price is lowering now. We've heard it from Jonathan Jones, basically saying that the number that he was trying to get, no organization is willing to give him that number per year. So now his price is lowering. So if you're the Baltimore Ravens, you're hearing everything that we're hearing plus more. And you know what? Trey Hendrickson's number is not as high as we thought it would be. Now we can go out and get him for a lower number and keep our first rounders, not 1, but 2 first rounders. So now that's why I'm thinking outside the box, Madeline. Like, what happened in the 25th hour for them to say, no deal? Because correct me if I'm wrong, I think Maxx Crosby, didn't he get to Baltimore like yesterday or something like that? So if he had the physical earlier today, you're just breaking this news now? I mean, that's why I'm thinking outside the box. But one thing I do know, Trey Hendrickson, his price has lowered, and there are a lot of other teams that are not willing to see what they can get in terms of contractually agreeing on with Trey Hendrickson. And maybe Baltimore feel like that's a better deal. And most importantly, Madeline, you keep 2 first rounders for your team, right? This year in 2027 first rounder as well. If you're able to go get a guy like Trey Hendrickson compared to trading for Maxx Crosby.
Yeah. A lot of questions remaining in this one as this huge blockbuster trade falls apart at the 11th hour. The Raiders releasing a statement simply saying the Baltimore Ravens have backed out of our trade agreement for Maxx Crosby. We will have no further comment at this time. Bryant, McFadden, thanks so much for the insight. No further comment, but lots of further questions as we look at the incredible career Maxx Crosby has had since 2019. Leads the league in TFLs, 6th in the NFL in sacks. Played the 11th most defensive snaps, but first among defensive linemen. Maxx Crosby no longer headed to Baltimore. Where will he play next?